Okay, so the next one is one where we need to find what's called the innermost expression. And what that basically means is that we have a mathematical expression with parentheses like this, and we can see that the parentheses are nested, so they can be nested one or more levels deep. And when you nest parentheses like this, it will be the case that some of the parentheses have parentheses inside them. In that case, we say they are not inner, whereas other expressions in closed parentheses like this or this will not have other parentheses inside them, and in that case we call them inner. And we want to find such an innermost expression. In case where there are multiple innermost expressions which are possible, we want to find the first one. In other words, we are looking for the first substring of these mathematical expressions that are A, enclosed by parentheses, and B does not have parentheses inside it. And that is what this function should return. Okay, so let's try to look a bit at the problem. So there's not an example of where we call this function, so I'm just going to copy an example in, like this. This should return y plus 2. So let's do like this, should be y plus 2. Boom. And then we can experiment with whether we can do this correct. So I've already inserted a breakpoint here because I messed up the start of the first video with a technical problem. So now I'm just going to insert an empty return statement and insert a breakpoint and start working on this in the debugger. So let's fire this up in the debugger. We can see that the expression the function is called with is called s. So we have it here. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we can make a simple observation first. The expression that we're looking for is always going to start with an opening parenthesis and end with a closing parenthesis. In other words, this is going to be a problem about finding start parenthesis and closing parenthesis and then selecting a substring. So if I just start by defining two variables, let's call it start and let's call it end, that can be 2. Then we can say if these are the candidate starts and ends, we need to return the substring between those two. How do we find a substring? Well, we need to use ThinkPython. And ThinkPython has some of the tools that we need. So it has a tool called slicing here, and this is a way we can extract substrings. No, here, yeah. So we can select substrings. Okay, how does that look in practice? That's maybe easier to explain. If I give it two numbers like 1 and 2 with a colon between, it's going to select all the letters starting at this one and including this one and ending right before this index. So this index is 2, that is that it's going to return the letters with index 0 and 1 here, not including 2. If I included more, I would have gotten more. Here I could also start in a different place, and I can remove the end, and it'll just give me the last part of the string. So that's one of the tools we need. So in other words, if I can correctly get these indices, I could maybe return s at start to end, like this. And that's going to be my strategy. So now it's a matter of finding these two indices. And as I said before, it's going to be a matter of finding start and closing parentheses. So what will be my idea here? My idea will probably be to start with the starting parentheses, because that seems simpler. Like, I have to start somewhere. I could also start with the closing, but I think I'll start with the starting one. So what if I make a loop that somehow iterates over all the starting parentheses in this string? There are a couple of ways of doing that, but I'm going to use the find method. So I'm going to make a loop that does just loops forever, like this. And then I'm putting in a break statement here because I don't actually want to. I want at some point to stop this loop when I've exhausted all the opening parentheses. So this loop should find this one, and then it should find this one, and then it should stop. How can I find the first one? I can use the find method like this. Oops, needs to know what I'm finding. And that'll actually give me 2 because S of 2 is this one. How could I potentially find the next one? Well, if I call this with 3 like this, the find method will look for this string, but it'll only start looking after the letter 3. Sorry, not the letter 3, after the third index in the string. That stuff is described here. No. Where? I'm sure I saw it somewhere. Here it is. And then it's described down here. So just to make it a little more clear, if I do, what was S? Let's do Y. So S.find Y. That's 4, because this it finds the first one. But if I tell it you should only start to look after the 6th letter, it'll return 8, because when you start to only look after the 6th letter, which is around here, this will be the first one it finds. And that's at index 8. Okay. So, when do I need to stop? Well, I need to stop when there are no more of these parentheses in the expression. So let's actually try to see what happens if I start at index 9 and look for Y. Then it gives -1. And that's because when it cannot find the letter, it gives a -1. So maybe I can use that. I can also use other constructions from the book, but I'm just going to use that because now I'm a fan of the find method. So how would I do this? I would say start is equal to s.find of the opening parentheses, and I start at where start is currently. And start is currently at 0. And then if start is less than 0, break, and else we print out what is in S when we start at index start and continue until the end. And then maybe we also print out what start is, like this. So maybe this is a good approach for getting these parentheses. Let's comment this one out, and then let's start looking at what this code does. And now I'm just going to select it, and then I'm going to use our shortcut. I don't know, if you watched the last video, maybe you can remember, but otherwise I'll tell you it's Shift Alt E, like this. Okay, so select it, Shift Alt E. Oi. It fails. So this keeps iterating because I made a mistake. Ha, smart. How do we stop the debugger? Stop. So that worked. Because what happens with start? Well, start is set equal to this index, but then I start looking for I want to look for the next one, right? I start when S is equal to, let's actually look at what happens, because this is something we can really use the debugger for, and I think it's super instructive. So let's insert some breakpoints. And then let's do this one, and then let's do this one. So now we got a ton of breakpoints here. I save it, and then I run it in the debugger. So what happens in the beginning? In the beginning, start is equal to 0, S is equal to this stuff, and then we evaluate what I have here. So what does this one do? Well, it ends up calling it like this, and it gives 2. So that's fine. So now start is equal to 2. It checks if 2 is less than, let me just jump one step. It checks if 2 is less than 0. It's not. So therefore it executes this line, and that's fine. I mean, that did what I actually wanted. Now we go up here. What happens here? So start is still 2, and then I do this, and that's 2. Because this actually needs to change. I need to look at the index after the one I found just before. And you need to start looking after this one, otherwise I'll just find it again. And I don't want that. So I need a +1 here. But, and this is how you make bugs in your code, because now it's not very elegant anymore. I actually want, in the first iteration, I want this to start from 0. So maybe I can do this. And now I think things match up. So let's stop the debugger, save it, start it again, and look at what happens in the debugger now. What is start? It's -1. What's s? It's this expression. So this one should give 2. It does. Then what should happen is that we check this condition. Happens to be false. Let me just remove this one. So we print it out. We go back up here. And now this expression should get 3 because it's this one. And it does. We print out this one. Let's see what happens in the next iteration. Now we are up here. Start is equal to 3. Start plus 1 is equal to 4. So this one gives us -1. And therefore, we end up here. We break. And we go out. Okay, so this is a way of finding all the opening parentheses. Now we need to find the right one. This one cannot be the right one. So we need to check here if it's the right one. So here, insert, check if it is the right opening parenthesis. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, let's find the next closing parenthesis. Right? Like let's just look at the expression. If I have this opening parenthesis, I can always look for the next closing parenthesis starting here. So I can do that as next closing, and that should be equal to s.find closing parenthesis, but I'm going to start at where the opening parenthesis is. I don't need to add a +1 because I know I'm at a start parenthesis, so it doesn't matter. So that's why I can find the next closing parenthesis like this. So let's stop it and then run it again in the debugger because I want to be able to experiment a little more here. So now we don't need to stop here at this breakpoint. Now we can go down here. We can look at what state the program is in. So it's next closing parenthesis is 7. S is like this, so we can also look at what we are currently trying to cut out. Oops, I pressed enter prematurely. It's because I need to press tab. I'm not so familiar with this. Tab. Okay, so this is the bit we're cutting out right now. But this is not the correct opening parenthesis. And why is it not correct? Well, it's not correct because there is another opening parenthesis inside the expression. That other opening parenthesis is before the closing parenthesis, and that's why it's not correct. So what can we do here? Let's do candidate inner expression, and that's S, where we start at the start index and we end at the closing index. So that gives me a candidate inner expression. Let me just try to run it, and we notice that this candidate inner expression, it starts a bit to, it includes the first opening parenthesis. We don't want that. So actually I'm going to start at start plus 1. I'm going to run it again. Candidate inner. Okay, I'm not very good at spelling today. This is wrong. Like, it shouldn't be this one, it should be this one. And why should it be this one? Well, it shouldn't be this one because it contains an opening parenthesis. In other words, if this one in the candidate inner, not the one else, it is an inner expression. And how can I implement this? Well, instead of checking if it's in it, I can say it is not in it. This is how you can check if a certain character is not in something, and in that case I know it is an inner expression. So at this point I would actually be done. And therefore I can return my candidate innermost expression here. And I think this should work. I really don't see why it shouldn't work. So let's put a breakpoint here and see if it does the right thing. And let's run. Oops, I need to restart the debugger because I changed the file. So let's look at this candidate inner. Candidate inner. It's this one, that looks fine. Start, looks fine. And closing is of course also fine. Okay, cool. So it seems to work in this case. And then I don't need this one down here, so I was apparently planning a little bit wrong. But that's fine. The important thing is that we solve it. Okay. Now, this video is quite long, and therefore I am very, very excited to see if this implementation works. Because if it didn't, I'm going to be sad panda. Oh no. Oh no. Why did you not work? Let's see what the test says. It says there's an error. So if there are no parentheses, it should just return the expression itself. That's evil. I mean, that's really evil. That's also a little bit stupid. I'm not even sure I agree with that. But this is how you can use the test to see what fails. And so what I did was that I pressed the test and then I pressed run and then I saw where it failed and scrolled up and then I could see that this was the problem. That's stupid. But it's the way it works. So let's try to fix it. So I just go to the function and here's a little bit of a shortcut. If you press and hold the control key, you can jump to functions. So I press and hold control and then it becomes a hyperlink. So now I click it, I get to my function, and then I'm just going to basically patch it here. So how will I know I am in this weird case? Well, I am in this weird case if it doesn't contain a parenthesis. So I just check if this is not in S, then I return S because S is itself its own innermost expression. Okay, so that's the way I chosen to fix that. Okay. I'm not going to re-record this video. I'm sure of that because it was too long, and it's good that I find I make a couple of mistakes. So let's try to run it, and now it works. I'm happy. I don't need more introspection about whether this is completely correct. Good. So I think I'll end it here, and then we'll move on to the next problem.